Everybody, what is going on? It has been literally a lifetime since the last time I did a live stream. And now that I have my brand new studio, I am ready to be live. My beautiful dog Iggy is all the way across the other side of the house, barking her head off, and you won't be able to hear it in here because I'm far enough away and I have a very thick door in between the two of us. So that means I can live stream whenever I want, which means live streams are back. Obviously, we're going to be practicing some portrait drawing today. I'm just going to be working on a piece that I want to work on anyway and answering whatever questions you have in. So if you have questions, just let me know in the comments or the live chat rather, and I'll get to answering that. But why don't we just dive into the drawing, and I'll tell you about the instruments, what am I saying, instruments? The materials that I'm using as I go, and you can ask whatever questions you want to ask in the meantime. So I've been starting out, actually, look at this, it's a bit of tissue paper with a lot of graphite on the edge of it. In order to kind of get really soft shapes established, I'm kind of starting out with this, and I've really been enjoying it lately, just in terms of getting something on the page that's kind of soft and organic and doesn't kind of get in the way later. But that's what I'm starting out with now. Obviously, it's a graphite drawing, so so it's all going to be kind of graphite, and I'll probably use quite soft graphite to start out. I'll probably start with like a B or something, just because I know that I'm going to go like full value with this, and in that case, it's not really a good reason to wait and like not use your proper values. Jason Milner with the first question asks, pencils or lead holders? Right now, I've got a lead holder. This one's from Koh-i-Noor. It's the Versatile 5900. It's light, it's stylish. It reminds me a bit of The Great Gatsby. For some reason, like these kind of marcations or whatever. The color scheme kind of gives me this feeling of like a slightly classy, lead holder. Most lead holders I don't really like. They tend to, maybe they feel a little bit cheap and they don't kind of feel good in your hand. So for me, it's kind of a no-go for most lead holders. Anyway, by the way, if anybody wants to sketch along with this, there's a link in the chat, the live chat, and eventually I'll put it into the description of the video as well, where you can go to my Patreon and download the source image so you can draw along with me. Let's see. A lot of people saying hello. My good buddy Steve Forster is somewhere in here. Steve Forster from the Long Island Academy. Eddie Sedgwick is saying hello to everybody. I want some questions, people. I need some questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep sketching out. And try to find my height versus width here. So these are my cheekbones, like here and here. I think that kind of more or less should give me like the height of the brow ridge if I kind of compare one to the other. I think that brow ridge is probably closer to being up here. Like the method I'm going to be using today is, you could loosely call it mass drawing. But in fact, in general, I would say like when I draw, I probably draw most with what I call a kind of hybrid approach. I use a lot of structural cues, and I also like a lot of kind of shadow and light information, even at the start. So Christian Lee Aragon says, I noticed you changed your drawing process recently. Is it any better? And if so, do you recommend it more? I guess it depends on what you mean by like changed. I guess if you ask me, I feel like I'm always changing. But there's a small difference between what I would say I do as an artist and what I do as a teacher. I think as a teacher, the fundamentals, the foundation of the drawing process that I teach hasn't really changed. But like as an artist, I feel like I'm always changing. You know, I remember, speaking of Steve Forster, who I've known for years, he and I originally went to the Florence Academy of Art in Italy together. He's the reason actually that I went there. He was really kind of tuned into academic work long before I was. Uh, but he had this question he wanted to ask the director. I don't know if he ever got to ask it to him, because it was like the game was always like, who can think of like the most intelligent question to like ask the director of the program. I don't know, for some reason we all wanted to like impress him, you know. But anyway, the question I think always went unasked was, yeah, okay, so if you're always supposed to be learning, like, what have you learned lately? You know, what have you learned 20 years, 30 years into your career? And it's such a good question because it points to this idea that maybe you should be learning 20, 30 years. Like if you can't answer that question, maybe you've kind of plateaued, maybe you've kind of stopped learning. And I don't think any proper artists like have that problem or that particular mentality where they're like, well, I'm going to stop learning. But you should always be questioning what you do and questioning, like, you know, where your ideas are going. I mean, or at least I always have, and I find it very beneficial. Wait a minute, I got to scroll back to get some questions that were asked. In general, by the way, I'm just going to answer the questions as they come in. Sharmaji Art asks, how to start practice for block-in as a beginner? Any tips from where a beginner to start as to adopt the block-in method? I would say pick a method or pick an approach, and then do 10 of them before you judge it. Like, I think what happens a lot of times with students is that they do like one of something, and then they start to judge, oh, this worked or this didn't work. I don't think within one or two attempts at any process that you're going to do anything of particular merit. You know, like you need to practice something 5, 10 times and then stand back from it and ask yourself, like, what did I learn from this? You know, like, what was good about this? What wasn't good about this? What can I improve about this process? But I would say, like, as a beginner, certainly you got to start somewhere, right? And whether you want to use the Loomis method, or you want to, you know, use my block-in tutorials, or you want to, you know, whatever approach that you want to take, start out, take it, and then do 5 or 10 of them before you say, like, oh, I feel like this was fruitless or not. Because really these things, a lot of times, I mean, I don't want to sound like too grandiose, but a lot of times they're a little bit too deep for you to get in like a minute, you know? Pencil Power says, can't sketch along, but love to listen to your wisdom anyway. Eddie Sedgwick asked, do you play pool? Man, I used to play pool. And I have to tell everybody out there, I have a very competitive spirit. And, you know, in some ways in life, like, that's a great thing. And it keeps you going. It keeps you motivated. You know, you're always trying to tackle like the next challenge. But it also has ways of like expressing itself that are totally useless to you, like being competitive at pool, unless you're what's the word, like you intend to go pro. If you're going pro, then sure, you know, you need that competitive spirit kind of boiling inside you. But I was never going to do that for sure. So didn't do me a whole lot of good to be as competitive as I was, and I also wasn't that good at it. You know what I mean? Like. Maybe it's just the justice of the universe that, you know, you can be good at a few things. You can't be really a master at everything. Which actually reminds me, you know, so there's this saying that everybody knows, that it's better to be a jack of trades than a master of none. Or is it? Or no, the saying is that you can be a jack of all trades and a master of none. But the rest of the saying is something like, but better to be a jack of all trades than a master of one, or something like that. That if you're a jack of all trades and you are a master of none, that's better than being a master of just one trade. Which, you know, I don't know. I mean, contemporary society in a world where we're specializing in everything that we do, is that true anymore? I don't know. Let's see. Navjot S asks, how's the new studio been treating you? Man, it's been treating me so good. I can't even tell you how good the new studio has been treating me. It's been fantastic, excellent, awesome, amazing. All things that you could hope that a new studio could be. That's what the new studio has been. It's got that. It's got multiple layers of doors. There's like a corridor on the way to the main door of the studio, so I can like close multiple doors between me and Iggy. But I love her. I love her so much, my little dog. But she's not conducive to certainly to doing audio work, which is a lot of what I do. Is just audio work. So so now that she's got a whole side of the house to chill in, I can work whenever I need to. So that's positive. Amireza Banay says, what do you think about hyperrealism? I don't know, like hyperrealism. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't think I care as much about it. I guess there's no way to say this without like maybe starting to sound judgy, you know, but I guess we're on YouTube, so probably I should have an opinion. I guess I think that with hyperrealism, I think you're trying so hard to technically make something that maybe you lose a bit of yourself in it. The more fair reading of it would be that really it's about the composition and the subject, and really it's just a style, isn't it? You know, it's not better or worse or whatever. It's just the idea is to make something. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I confuse it a little bit with like photorealism as well. Like if anybody can tell me what's the difference between hyperrealism and photorealism, then maybe I could make a better judgment about it, because I feel like photorealism, I think we already ran that race. Like I think that was done in the like 18th century, you know, when the camera was invented. That's when painting went through its big crisis, where we were like, well, what are we doing here? You know, you don't need us to make a picture of somebody anymore. So like, why? What is our purpose? And so we evolved, and we said, well, our purpose is this. Our purpose has changed, you know? And so now it kind of feels like this reversion, like the photograph kind of took our reason to be. And then I guess we're just trying to like, not really trying to take it back, but we're trying to like be like the machine. It's like an impression of a machine, which maybe has a lot of relevance today. We're thinking about AI and machine learning and stuff, and the relevance of like humans inside various endeavors. Maybe it's a good question, you know. maybe photorealists have already started asking this, you know, like we want to be like a machine. Is that the future of people drawing and painting? That we just try to be like a machine? Jason Milner asks, I guess my question is the benefits of lead holders consistent weight, length versus pencils. I've noticed you use both for the same drawings. Yeah, it's true. I think maybe it's easy to, what's the word? I think maybe it's easy to think about kind of marginal gains. And I'm a big fan of marginal gains, right? Like if you make your drawing process like 1% more efficient, maybe that 1% echoes out and becomes, you know, meaningful at some point. The difference in between lead holders and graphite pencils in terms of their performance, I don't think it's particularly meaningful. I think it's just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, you can use kind of either one, and either one can work pretty well. I don't think the performance is particularly different in my estimation. So the reason that I'm like using different ones, it just comes down to like what I'm doing. Like, the reason I'm using this one right now is just because it's the one that was closest, that had the softest lead in it. So I think I'm drawing with like a B or a 2B here. And it just that's the pencil I happened to be around at the time. By the way, like with this mass drawing, it kind of looks like I'm drawing a bit of nothing, I guess. But I'm just trying to kind of establish the main proportions nice and like softly, and maybe some of the first like main shapes. But keeping things really generic, because you kind of commit a little bit too early, you run the risk of committing to an inaccurate set of shapes. I'm like looking at the shape of the forehead through here, looking at the height of the brow down to the nose. What is the angle of the nose, for instance? I'm doing all the measuring just like kind of pretty loosely. Avalokit Alec Art says, will you do live sketch in the future again? Yeah, man, that's what this is about. This is me returning to the live streaming game. I will be doing them probably. All right, let's talk about what I want to do, and then we'll see if I'm able to do it. So what I'd like to do is like have a schedule. Like each month I do a live stream, on the second Saturday or something like that, where I'll come in and just answer questions and draw and whatever. Now, the things that could get in the way of that are like this month, like I'm traveling to Rome to teach a workshop. So next month is going to be in jeopardy for being able to do one on a particular day. So I don't know, like I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but the point is like, yes, I absolutely want to do this. And with that in mind, one of the reasons that I want to do this is that I established for myself a target like a couple of years ago. It's like, all right, I've been on Instagram for a long time, and it's a platform that I kind of love and I hate at the same time. Like the algorithm on Instagram is like really, really powerful, and short form content is really kind of mind numbing a bit. Like I'd say like I'm probably on Instagram because I've been on Instagram, not because I think Instagram's like great. Let's just, be honest about it. So I wanted to, for a long time, like really invest in YouTube, and I'm on the cusp. We're not there yet, but I'm on the cusp of getting to 100,000 subscribers, which it's one of those rare things I actually like put in my goals. I think it was a goal in 2022. It's 2023 now, to like hit 100K. And so I invest a lot of time and a lot of effort in making YouTube videos and stuff. And for a long time, I did a lot of live streams and things. But because I want to get to that 100K, I want to start live streaming again, and I want to grow this audience here, because I think it's just like a really huge milestone. And YouTube is, in my opinion, like the best place if you want to cultivate a community on social media. YouTube's the place to do it. It's not IG. It's not TikTok. So for all of you like aspiring creators out there, for sure, this is an unambiguous message. Go to YouTube. Put your effort into YouTube. Because unlike some of these much more strongly algorithmically driven social media platforms like Instagram, YouTube is kind of primarily a search engine. So you are protected from, at least to a certain extent, you're protected from the whims of whatever algorithm is directing traffic. You kind of have a little bit more say about your own popularity, which is really what you want as a content creator. You don't want to be like, all of a sudden the algorithm decides that you're not interesting, or the post that you worked a really long time on sucks, so it doesn't give you any play. You want the quality of your content to dictate its performance. Rizbad Kumar Nirwan is asking, what is art according to you? It's a fair question. I don't know, man. I mean, maybe I would have had an answer at some point, but I don't feel very like dogmatic about about artwork and art making. I kind of feel like it's a broad church, and I'm quite happy for everybody to be a part of it. You know, there's things that kind of make you scratch your head a bit, you know, in a not in a good way, but for the most part, I think like there's room for everybody in here. Day2 says, I know how to paint from pictures, but I don't know how to paint from life, or don't know how to paint from my imagination. Any tips? Drawing from your imagination is is its own skill. It's not like a, what do I want to say? Like, it's not something that you just go like, oh, I can do it now, or I can't do it now. Like there's a series of memory exercises that you should follow if you want to draw and paint from your imagination. For instance, in Block-In Bootcamp a couple months ago, I did the course that I'd been threatening to do for a long time, which is a course on memory drawing. So we did 2 different exercises to enhance and build upon your ability to memorize your subject and draw from memory. I think the lessons were so fun to do, and a lot of the students that took part were like, "Oh my God, you know, this is all the things that I didn't know kind of came to the surface." Because in a way, like everything that you're doing, like this is a memory drawing. Like every minute or so, I'm looking over at my source image on my iPad, and I'm kind of referencing that. But for the most part, I'm just drawing what I recall and some of the structural things that I understand about a portrait. So in a way, like you could argue very easily that this is a memory drawing. But when you strip away that ability to look back at your source image and you rely like totally on your capacity to memorize, a lot of times it reveals like the things that you don't know, like about, for instance, like how the eye looks. Like one of the exercises we did was we were going to draw an ear, but we drew that ear from memory, so that we would look at a source image for I think 5 minutes, and I talked about it and like diagrammed on it and stuff. Tried to show everybody like, here's what I see when I'm looking at it. And then I would then like take that off the screen, and we'd just draw from memory for I think like 30 or 25 minutes or something. Then we kind of go back and look at it again. So that's the exercise I would recommend. Is like work on memory drawing if you want to increase your capacity to draw from imagination. Because really, are you drawing from imagination, or are you drawing from a stockpile of remembered structures and images? Ignacio Navas says, as a beginner, should I approach figure drawing with a block-in method or constructive? I think, Eduardo, that you might be confusing a little bit the usage here. So there is a constructive block-in method, and then there is also a more visual block-in method. And I think what you're asking is, should you block in visually or should you block in structurally? I think that there are merits to each one, and I'll tell you what those merits are in my estimation. So blocking in visually, which is what we're doing here, we're doing kind of masses of value. I think this gets you a result faster. Therefore, some academies kind of prefer it because they want their student work to look really good, and drawing visually helps them get their student work to a good level relatively quickly. However, I think that the structural approach actually has kind of longer legs. Like I think eventually it makes you better at drawing if you understand like the structural components to design. Whereas understanding just how to draw visually, it limits you in a way to very specific lighting situations very often. So I would say that there are merits to each one, Eduardo. And because of that, this is what I did. I'd try and learn both. I mean, that's just the bottom line with a lot of this stuff is, unfortunately, it's not an either or. It's definitely a both and. So learn both of them is what I would say. One day, by the way, one day I'll do my figure drawing course. Which actually, now that I have my studio, my new studio, I have the possibility to finally film this figure drawing course that I've been talking about for ages. But for the time being, I'm quite tied up with anatomy for portrait artists. That's the one right now that I'm doing my best to get out into the world. We're probably about maybe 30% into the project at this point. We have several exercises out, we have several lectures out, but still making the content for that lesson, which I think is a banger. I think I'm really enjoying the portrait course, or the portrait anatomy course. I think a lot of my students so far on Patreon are also quite enjoying it. Which, by the way, side note, please, I'm on YouTube, so I have to say this. Please like the video or like the live stream. If you're here watching or whatever, just hit the like button. And if you think the content's cool and you like to learn to draw, remember to subscribe to the channel. We're on the way to 100K, and your subscription will be one more step on that journey, and I would massively appreciate it. It really helps my channel grow, and it doesn't cost you a single dollar or penny. Or I was trying to think of world currencies. I wanted to say centesimi, like when I was in Italy, and the euro was used. We had centesimi was like cents. I don't know why. I mean, I wanted to say pennies, but then I thought very American centric saying that. Anyway, Santiago asks, are you starting the drawing in a mass approach? Yeah, it's very much mass oriented, and I don't know maybe how far I'll be able to get with it today, but I just thought kind of massing this in, because it's a very, it's a drawing that's very, frankly, the subject is a very, very mass oriented subject. So I thought it would fit really easily. And also, there's a thing, just as a YouTube streamer, I'll kind of peel back the curtain here. When you start out your stream, you want maybe something that grabs the attention of the viewer, and mass drawing tends to look cooler, faster than what, say, structural drawing does, which is generally just looks like a weird box, and then you're starting to break angles off that box, and it's, you guys know, it's a very slow and studious kind of approach. Reynola Dominguez says, good morning. Do you agree that in order to become proficient at quick sketch portraits, you must first gain skills in the long drawing? I don't know. I think people that do that Riley drawing method would disagree with your statement there. That's not me. I don't use the Riley approach. I'm gonna be honest. Let's put all the cards on the table. I don't really like the Riley approach. I think it's kind of it looks kind of. By the way, come at me, Riley people. Just tell me. I don't care. But I think it looks a bit oversimplified. It draws one particular kind of head, and all the Riley approach heads tend to look like that head, and I don't think that head looks very sophisticated. That's my opinion. Please, I hope I'm not aggregated somewhere as the guy that's against the Riley method. But I'd be happy to learn different about it if that was the case. But that's where I'm at right now, opinion-wise. However, though, I think that to draw quickly, I think you probably want to train quickly. My personal experience, I can say that when I learned to draw, I learned very much in the slow way. We did sight size, and we were drawing really slowly for a really long time. We were talking 75-hour long poses, and I benefited a lot from that, obviously. It's not of no merit to me. But in the end, I kind of feel it's a bit excessive, actually. I don't think 75 hours for a figure drawing is... I think you train how you work, and I don't think that very many artists work that way, where they're going yeah, I'm going to take 75 hours to produce my drawing or painting. So I also think that's a little bit overwrought, it's a bit bit too much time. So I guess the short answer to your question is not really. I don't really think that you need to train slow in order to draw fast. I think you probably need to train fast to draw fast. I had to train myself to draw much more quickly than I was used to. Navjot asks, should eyebrows be in a block-in? Hey man, or Navjot, I don't know if that's hey man or hey woman or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if they're useful, take them, If it's useful, take it. That's what I have to say. Jasmine asks, I was wondering if you have any life drawing from imagination courses. No, I'll say that everything that I do, like all of my training was training from life. So all the drawing that I do, all the prescription for drawing that I make, more or less comes from that place where I'm, like, it would work from life or it would work from a photograph. Because of the way I trained, I think that's just like the way my mind works. So I think that, I guess I was never really trained to draw from photographs. I don't know, I'm sure there's maybe more effective or efficient ways to draw from photographs, maybe, than what I do. But I look at my drawing education as kind of more of a holistic one, and one that can benefit you however you want to work. Forster Art says, so what are you learning? What am I learning? I think most recently, I had an educational experience that was very transformative. I actually took some lessons with an artist who studied at the Repin Academy, St. Petersburg. And there are a lot of revelations, frankly, about the differences in between educational experiences, between like what I learned in Florence and what he learned at the Repin Academy. And I think primary among them, and what I really loved about the experience, was that the premise for like how you started drawing, like what are you here to study? Which, by the way, I'm making Patreon videos about all this stuff, about all the stuff I learned from this artist at the Repin Academy, which will be coming out, I think, in August. Yeah. And you'll be able to like work along with it and kind of learn the lessons along with me. But the cool thing that came out of it was like really where their priorities were, which was something so unfamiliar to me. Like I was always taught that, oh, right, like, well, the fidelity to your subject, or like looking like your subject, that's the most important thing. So for instance, when the model got down off the stand, you're supposed to put your pencils down. Don't even pick up your pencils, when the model's not on the stand. That's how strict we are feeling about how you should draw solely from observation. And sorry, I got a phone. I knew something was going to happen to this year. I got a phone call on my phone that I had to not take, and it was distracting. But what this artist recommended or said that basically was the influence when he was in school, was that your job really is to make a really cool drawing. Like your job is to excite people, to make something that we want to see, and that small, seemingly like small difference in how you communicate your priorities, really it changes everything about how you draw. And so if you grow a philosophy of drawing out of that idea, I think fundamentally it'd be quite different from one that's established with an idea of just making a study that represents the subject, right? So that was something I learned recently that I thought was like really mind-blowing. Eddie Sedgwick says, to live is to learn is to live. Eddie, I'm with you. Gerard Dunn says, dude, you don't just end up with pretty renderings in the end, you also have a beautiful process. Thank you so much, Gerard. Navjot says, Riley method. Hey, I have an opinion. That's just my opinion. But I'll say this, my opinions are wide open to influence and change. So if I come to the point where I feel like there's a good argument or I see evidence of a good argument, I'm on board. Vadim says, hi, how's your day going? My day is going pretty well. We had a great walk with Iggy in the woods. And then a couple things happened. She saw a dead rat, which she was very interested in. I was very interested in her not being interested in. And then she also was startled by a bird. So big day for Iggy. Which I'm sure is what everybody showed up to find out. How was Iggy's day? But largely my day follows how Iggy's day goes. So if she's having a stressed out day, then I have a stressed out day. But so far, so good. Nitanshu Dwivedi says, how to start practicing live drawing. Well, I would say that you better start with a concept. So you should start with, as somebody asked earlier, like, well, how do you want to approach your drawing? Are you going to approach it in a way where you are emphasizing the visual characteristics, like this drawing? Or are you intending to represent your subject more in the way that it is constructed? So if you think about construction, you're going to think basically about like a cube or a sphere, or any of these kind of constructive notions of form in a 2D space. That is how you're going to govern your decisions, and your decisions lead to what your drawing is like. So I think a lot of people go to life drawing, like my sister actually. My sister was living in the UK, and she went to this life drawing session, and she called me afterwards actually almost kind of in tears. Like she had gotten in front of this model and tried to draw it, and I guess just whatever she thought was going to happen was not what was happening. And she felt like really, I want to say like she felt humbled, but I think she felt a bit, in some ways, maybe humiliated by the I guess kind of like the intensity of the experience. Like there's all this whole world that you need to draw up there, and she felt like just overwhelmed with her inability to capture it. So I guess the best way to be able to start out would be to be able to start out with a plan. So if you have some experience making studies, I think that would strongly benefit you before you start out like showing up at a live drawing course, because just like that Mike Tyson quote that I'm always using, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth, right? And like being in the studio with a live nude model, I gotta tell you, it will punch you in the mouth. Like it will get on top of you. Things can change really quickly and it can be an intimidating process. Not that it has to be. I mean, it's fun eventually, but you gotta have a plan. You can't just go in cold. PD Pete says, do you still use mirrors and plumb lines to allow yourself to step away and look at your drawing or painting objectively? In fact, usually I just do this. Mirrors are really great and really cool. And by the way, like really useful. Like I just noticed like this nose is way too long. But at the same time, they can be, it's not always necessary to always like have a mirror. I got kind of like, I guess I got like addicted to my mirror when I was a student. It was like, the mirror was everything. I needed to be all the time looking in the mirror. In fact, it was like looking more in the mirror than I was looking, just at my drawing objectively. And I realized at that point, like, oh, I'm not even like using the mirror the way you should be using it. Like it should be a fresh eye, but I was using it as like everything, So in general, I don't use them so much, but I'll tell you this, I haven't thrown away my black mirror. It's just there on the other side of my studio. Yeah. So yes and no, I guess. Eddie Sedgwick came through with the actual quote, better to be a master of one than a jack of all trades who's a master of none. Wait, no, that's Eddie, that's not it. I don't think that's it. I think it's the opposite. Or I hope it's the opposite. Otherwise, I'm like quoting it the wrong way. Sarath Varma says, Thanks for a lot for this stream. Do you have any tips for studying something like anatomy or perspective with limited time available, and any suggestion for master studies at earlier stages? I guess, I mean, in terms of studying anatomy, I'll tell you my approach to teaching anatomy, and why I think it's a good approach. Anatomy can be a very dense subject. And let's be honest, like, it is dense. It's kind of this big, kind of comprehensive thing, and it's difficult to kind of get your head around. And there's no way to make it not that. But I'll say that there is anatomy that I use. And by the way, like, I studied for years and years and taught anatomy for years and years. So when I'm making my anatomy course, it's not just based on like what I think might be cool. Like, it's based on like also watching my students over the years. One thing that I found though is that, you know, like, if you don't practice anatomy through drawing, it will not magically make its way into your drawing. Like, you need to practice it as much as you need to learn it. So whatever you do with anatomy, make sure that any theoretical learning is accompanied frequently and perhaps primarily with drawing experience. Because if it isn't, I find that the pathway to get it into your work actually is a lot longer and a lot less rewarding. That's my experience. Jeremiah Stewart says, what would be the most simple yet versatile painting palette? Well, I think you start talking about a limited palette of some kind. In general, there is what's referred to as the Zorn palette. That's an earth red, that's yellow ochre, black and white. I think in general you have to say that the consensus is that that is the simplest, best palette you can work with. There's not a lot of reason to dispute that. However, any palette can be a limited palette. You can choose a limited palette of a cadmium red, viridian, cad yellow, and white. Like, that's a kind of limited palette. So don't underestimate the options that you have in a limited palette, I guess, because there are many. You can do a lot with a limited palette. This is one tip I'll give you in terms of like where I differ. Most limited palettes, like the Zorn palette, are described as using yellow ochre. I find yellow ochre to be a really low tinting yellow. It's a very weak yellow in terms of its tinting strength. And so it tends to get, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, tends to get overshadowed by like a strong red, like an English red or something. So I use actually I use a stronger yellow. It's called yellow brown from Old Holland, and it is in the FAQs. If anybody wants to access that information, it's in the FAQs, which is linked in the description of this video. So easy to find, easy to access that information. You don't have to worry about writing it down. Liz Gridley asks, what kind of dog is Iggy? Iggy is an incredibly adorable, beautiful, perfect, and I'll say it in Norwegian, svensk dansk gårdshund, which means a Swedish-Danish farm dog. Which, by the way, I don't know if I assume everybody knows, maybe nobody knows. I live in Norway. My wife is Norwegian, and we moved here a few years ago, and it was at that time that we got our little Iggy. And she's been a non-stop bundle of joy ever since we got her. But being that she's a gårdshund or a farm dog, you know, she likes to protect the farm. You know, that's her primary job as she sees it, is farm protection. So that means a little bit of barking is going to be a part of her routine. Which, you know, I mean, if you have a dog, you know, it's not ideal, but you live with it. You live with it as a dog owner, and you kind of deal with it. But it's really bad for live streamers to have like a barking dog sort of yelping in the background of your live stream. Not helpful. So we're starting to get like a picture that we can kind of see developing here. I mean, there's some very rough, loose shapes. I'm gonna get into some, like you can see over here, like I've totally lost this back edge, kind of focusing just on this side of the face. I think it's probably okay. Charlotte Beck says, do you give workshops here in Norway, IRL? I currently do not do any IRL teaching in Norway. I'm not totally opposed to it. My wife has this idea, like, so we recently moved out to the countryside and we have kind of a big house in the countryside. And my wife was like, oh, we should have a thing where we do like private lessons. Like people can come here and we have like a spare loft to where they can stay, and we should do like that. And I thought, yeah, I mean, that sounds interesting, you know, in one way. I don't know. We don't have any plan for it today. But right now, the only IRL workshop that I'll teach, certainly this year, is the one in Rome, which is, at the moment, is filled up. But I do like, you know, I miss kind of working with like people in the studio. Like when you're making video lessons, like all my Patreon lessons, it's really important that you're quite comprehensive in the way that you create your lesson. When you're teaching in person, you can like forget to say something and then say it 5 minutes later, like, oh yeah, don't forget to do this. Or the next time you come around to the drawing, you just go like, oh, you shouldn't have made that edge so strong, or whatever. I think in some ways, like teaching IRL, it's actually a little bit easier, just because you have that kind of fluidity. You know, you're not, you don't have to actually like plan as much. It was a great diagram I saw once that was describing like different ways to create a presentation to get across like some kind of information, right? So it was describing like 3 different plans of making it. So if you wanted to make a presentation in 15 minutes to communicate your idea, like a presentation is 15 minutes long, that's going to take you about an hour. If you have unlimited amount of time to communicate your point, you don't have to prepare at all. Which basically it kind of is talking about like where your work is, or where the communication is. It's kind of front loaded, or is rather like viewer loaded or you loaded. So when you're making online courses, you have to do like a lot of kind of research and work beforehand, and pairing. Most of it's like making sure that you're not redundant and like saying something over and over again, or what's the quickest way to get this point across. Things like that are what you're thinking about making online courses, where teaching IRL, you just like shoot from the hip a little bit. Eddie Sedgwick says, I feel like hyperrealism, photorealism is just a painted photograph. In some cases, I think that's exactly what it is. Santiago says, does the fact that you put value from the first moment make your drawing less flexible? Not exactly. I think I know where you're coming from, that the notion that you have very quickly this stuff on the paper that could be theoretically like in the way. But if you see how I'm putting it in, like it's actually very like movable. There's not a lot of like hard edges and things. I would say that this is still like a highly flexible drawing, in my estimation. So Avalokit Alex says, are you rubbing the blend stumps hard or light? In some cases, I'm rubbing them quite hard. This is something that, so I've been advising people to use stumps for a long time now. And my advice used to be, well, okay, I'm going to say use a stump, but be a little careful. Like if you overuse a stump, you know, it's going to, you can have some bad results. And I feel like I'm kind of changing my tune on that. So I kind of feel like you can stump your drawing a lot before it ever becomes a problem. So I feel like just kind of go crazy with your stump, see how far it can take you in terms of efficiency, and just kind of go with the flow. You know, sometimes drawing is not about making the perfect mousetrap. Sometimes it's just about like figuring out what works in the moment and kind of going with that. feel like a good drawing or a good painting is also has an element of improvisation, where even you can be a little bit surprised by what happens. Hope that tracks for everybody. I mean, obviously, when you're learning, it's harder. Or when you're a beginner, it's harder to go like, yeah, I'll just go with the flow and like whatever happens, happens. You kind of want to like find a track and stick to it. But I think that in my life, in my career, like what I've realized is I like much more finding solutions than I do like just executing solutions. So for me, I like that ability to still be able to search for something, to be on a search. If I feel like the conclusion is already foregone, maybe I find that a little bit boring. PK Praveen says, what is your favorite art book for portrait study? I don't know. Is there a good one? For portrait study is the question. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of books for like drawing and I guess Loomis's book on portraiture I find very relevant. I find it very, very useful, very practical. I think Loomis did more than most in terms of like creating a practical guide to actually making portrait drawings. So that's my take on it. I mean, there's other great books. This is not always for portrait drawing specifically. Like Harold Speed's Practice and Science of Drawing is a great one. But by the way, all of this actually is in my FAQs as well. If you want to know like all the books that I recommend, they're all there. And Navjot says your live streams are therapeutic for us artists. Alanon says, hey, will you keep this live stream up so we can watch it later? No, it's live or nothing. No, it'll be up. It'll be up, of course. Yeah, and the link. There's also like a permanent post linked on my Patreon page. It's free for the public, so it's not behind a paywall or anything. With these super casual streams, I like to reach out to the world and just draw and like check in with people and take the pulse of the nation or of the world, and just see what's up. El Kamlichi says, thoughts on mixing shading techniques like cross-hatching and blending? Yeah, man. Mix all of them that you can. I think that I'm a big fan of variety. I want to see variety in a drawing. I don't want some like super dry approach that's just like this rendered form, strictly made with no sense of like space or depth and stuff. I want space. I want depth. I want like composition. I want all that stuff to happen in a drawing. So I think that that's going to involve a lot of variation, a lot of experimentation and different things. So give me the variety every day of the week. Eddie Cedric says, everybody grinds away. There are no huge leaps that are not preceded by long plateaus. Tell me about it. Yeah, that's very much art education. I think maybe this is a relationship to somebody asked earlier about anything I would suggest to like somebody starting out to learn portraiture. I just said like kind of be patient, like try something out a dozen times before you draw some conclusion about the utility of it. Whether it's good or no, like whether the advice works or whatever. You need to practically learn to apply it. It's not easy, or everybody would be doing it. Let's see. Christian Lee Aragon says, why don't you use charcoal as much? I saw your reel on Instagram using Nitrum. Do you think charcoal is trickier than graphite, or is there some other reason? I drew with charcoal all through my student career, and I guess the idea was, it's supposed to be more painterly, that it's more like oil painting. Therefore, if we're educating oil painting students, then it would be good to use it. I just don't know that that really holds water. I think that graphite can be just as painterly as charcoal. So I don't know, like I guess the argument kind of falls apart. And then I just think like, why I like drawing with graphite, so why wouldn't I just draw with graphite? Yeah. No, I don't know. It's just a taste thing. It's just a preference thing. I just happen to like graphite, so I draw with graphite. Colorful Artist says, I love your work, and I wanted to ask if you'll ever make a hair tutorial. You know, I've learned as a YouTuber never to say never, because you know, the things that you think you wouldn't do today, I mean, maybe you find a good reason for tomorrow. But I'll say, like in general, it's unlikely, just because I feel like a bit like drawing is drawing is drawing. Like if you can draw, then you can draw a hair. Now, like, by the way, like, keep your receipts and like watch this space. In 6 months, they'll be like, "How to Draw Hair" by Stephen Bauman. You know, like my 5 best tips for hair drawing. Anyway, Lucky says, "Hello, Stephen. Do you think when practicing facial features, you should always place them in a head for context?" I think that's the most helpful way to do it. You know, I'm big on kind of learning stuff holistically and learning stuff together, because I feel like if we itemize and compartmentalize too much, we kind of miss out on some of the interesting kind of blending of ideas, blending of kind of notions and practices. So I'm a big fan of trying to let everything bleed together, if possible. So usually, yeah, like I would draw it within a head. I think my views on that maybe have softened like a little bit. You know, if you say that you want to draw a composition, maybe it's not always so important to have like the whole head. Like I'm losing lots of edges now. So there's an argument that like I'm not drawing the head as much in a context as I would have. I mean, that being said, like I'm not necessarily a student these days, and this is a drawing that I'm doing more because I think it can be a very interesting drawing than I am to learn. But like overall, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say, yeah, like I think in general, the good advice for students is that you should draw the context at the head, for sure. Navjot says, how much of likeness do you aspire to have when drawing for yourself? I feel like likeness is always a very good guide to the quality and kind of completeness of your drawing. So even though this one right now looks a bit, eventually I'll get it to where it has a good sense of likeness. So to me, I think it's important. I value it rather highly. Chloe Calloway says, are there any contemporary artists that are getting you excited recently? Contemporary artists that I'm excited about recently. Hang on a second. Yes, I'm sure that there are. One artist that I'm always thinking of that is exciting to me is Amaya Gurpide. Like, she's someone who's really embraced drawing as an art form, and it's always out there kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible with drawing. I say that specifically because I think, you know, drawing sometimes has this second-class artist kind of association to it. I don't feel that way. Obviously, I feel very passionate and very serious about drawing as an art form. But in general, and I think it comes from galleries, like that the galleries will kind of treat it this way. Typically much more interested in oil painting because I think it's kind of an easier product a bit. I'm not against the commodification of art. I mean, painters got to live, man. You gotta live, you gotta eat, you gotta sell your work. But just because it's convenient doesn't mean it's like the only like game in town, you know? So I guess I feel like I like artists that are pushing the boundaries of drawing, and not just going, oh, I draw, but just as a preparation for my painting, you know. See, Zephyr 353 says, is it possible to follow your tutorials, boot camps with digital drawing? I'll tell you, concepts are concepts. There's no boundary in it. Like there's an artist, oh no, I'm gonna forget his name. Oh man, oh that sucks. There's a really great digital painter, I can't remember his name, but I know about him because specifically like one of his really big influences, like when he was kind of learning to do what he does, was actually John Singer Sargent. And so I think like there's definitely like a crossover. And I believe that his digital work is even better for it because there's a way of like picture making that I think can be really beneficial across the board, you know, in making like kind of compelling, interesting, like dynamic pictures. Of course, you know, you should learn Photoshop just as well as you learn, you know, any of these kind of representational analog skills, but I definitely think it has a value. That's just my opinion, though. Amireza Bane says, is the pencil brand makes huge differences in shading phase? Yeah, it does, in fact. So this one, this company Tombow, right? It's one of two companies that I'm using all the time. I think, yeah. So these are the two pencils that I'm always using. It's not a paid placement, by the way, FYI. There's Mitsubishi and there's Tombow. They're both Japanese brands. And if you're getting the Mitsubishi, you want to get the high uni. And this is the Tombow homograph mono. The Japanese graphite tends to go like one place softer than like Western. So if it's produced in America or Europe, or sorry, let me say, like this Tombow that's an HB would be like a B in, or sorry, I said it the wrong way. An HB in Japan is an H in the US. No, I said it the other way. An HB in Japan would be a B in the West. So they just have like kind of softer grading for their lead, which I think generally gives them like a slightly smoother feeling when you're drawing with them. So a lot of the lead that I use, certainly the wood pencils that I use are from those companies, and I really stick by them. I wish they would sponsor me. I wish you could be sponsored. Send me all the pencils you can, Tombow. And of the two, I'll say Tombow is my favorite by a long shot. Colorful Artist says, do you have any tips for junior in art school pursuing fine arts? Think about whether or not you want to go to college. It costs a lot to go to art school, and the prospect of making a lot of money as an artist is not always so easy to determine. I went to an art school or an art college in the States, which was, it's like kind of a bargain basement art college. I think I paid about a couple $1,000s per term. And I'm very thankful that it was that, because that debt followed me around for like a long time. And let me tell you, like, the first years that you get out of art college as an artist, they are lean years. Everybody wants to help an art student, but then like when you're an art professional, I think there's an expectation that, you know, you should be like doing this thing now, right? You trained for it, so now you're a pro. Now go make money. But it doesn't always work like that. You don't just get out of art school and then all of a sudden you're this expert artist who knows everything that needs to be done to be an artist. You have a lot of kind of growing to do in the arts. You have a lot of growing to do in terms of your profession. But think about whether or not you really want to go to an art school. There's a lot of different ways to be educated. And I'm not saying like, oh, just do online courses. You can study at ateliers. You can study through apprenticeships. I think all of these have an opportunity to bring you to a successful result. and they don't cost like, $40,000 a year. Actually, in general, I would say if your art education is $40,000 a year, that's a red flag for me, because there's no way you're jumping out of school making that kind of money. Is that too pessimistic? I don't want to be like a dream killer, but just be aware. Be aware of the economic footprint you're putting down when you pay that kind of money for your education. Let's see. Christian Lee Aragon says, what is the future of traditional realistic artists with the emergence of AI? Are we safe? Are you optimistic about it or pessimistic? It's a really cool question, and one that I've had so many conversations about. None of them on the air. But like I can give you the broad strokes of my opinion about it. I think that to a certain degree, traditional artists are insulated from the immediate effects. As I think some digital artists that are kind of auteurs, I think will also be a bit insulated. I think it's the kind of mid-level artists that, like commercial artists, that probably have the most to worry about, because if you're just the hands of somebody who already knows what they want, it's a little bit difficult to hold on to your position of utility when that can be done through a prompt. But I don't think that anybody's really safe from AI. Like safe? I don't know. I'll say this, for the last few months, I've been developing my own AI model, my own language model, that's trained on my lessons, and I've been beta testing it with my students. Not because I think, I'm gonna replace my teaching with AI, but I think that right now we're in a place where you'd like to ensure that you're ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve. And if in a couple of years, and I think there's, by the way, really some cool applications for AI in art education. If in a couple of years I find there's some really interesting application that I want to make, I'll probably need an AI trained model to make it. So rather than waiting till I'm thirsty to like dig the well, I'm digging it kind of way in advance. Tegan says, can someone make a living painting and teaching at an atelier? I don't know why you'd want to do it at an atelier, but yeah. In general, I worked at an atelier for what, 12 years, more like kind of 15 if you count my student teaching years. And it's fine. Like if you don't want to sully your hands with running a business, then yeah, I mean, working for an atelier is fine. But I think in general, anytime you're working for somebody else, they are going to be reaping a bigger benefit than you are. And so once I kind of realized that, I realized I needed to be, for me and like for my family, like I need to be doing this for myself. I don't want to be like kind of a cog in the machine, like working for somebody else. Like I want to build something for myself that I can carry with me, Santiago says, I'm so impressed of how fast you can get the impression of the lighting situation in the model. How could we practice that ability? Get one of these and just start rubbing in shapes. It's basically mass drawing with a softer tool. By the way, this is massively inaccurate. There's so many things wrong with it. But I've live streamed for a long time, and you just learn to kind of go with the flow. There's a lot that I'm going to miss, but there's a few things that I'll hit as well. So I just kind of try to lower my expectations and just get in there and like have a good time and answer some people's questions and that. Eduardo says these live streams are just so calming. Well, I'm glad. Lunat Art says, hello, Stephen. Could you give me a tip on how to start selling paintings? How did you start? P.S. You're an amazing artist. Thank you so much for that. It's very kind. I think that probably my How it started for me is not very replicable, but I will tell you what it is. Anyway, so when I was a student at the Florence Academy, there was what they called an alumni show I think they did it more or less every year. So in one of those alumni shows, they had a donation section where they asked for artists to donate paintings that would benefit the scholarship fund. Now, what I knew was that the people that were going to be at this exhibition, a lot of them were gallerists, people in the arts, people who you'd like to have your paintings in front of. So most people would donate like kind of this is just a fact. I'm not like making anything up here or casting aspersions on anybody, but most people would donate like a kind of failed painting, like a painting that was like, meh, not so good. But I thought, well, and at this time I was a first year student actually. And I was always doing paintings on my own time. So I had paintings that I was making, portrait paintings. And so I donated like my best one. Because I thought, well, it'll be easy. Be easy to like soar like an eagle when you're like, hanging around chickens, meaning like everybody else is putting in the work they didn't like. If I put in the work that I did think was good, it would be easy to stand out as being quite good. And so sure enough, Laura Grenning from Grenning Gallery bought my painting from the auction because she saw like, oh, there's like value in this. I think actually she went on to sell it later, which of course I didn't see any profit of. But so she got it for a bit of a deal and sold it on and made a tidy profit from it, which is great. But that meant I started a relationship with her, and I worked with her for a lot of years. I still have some paintings there in not in Glen Cove, in the Hamptons in New York. So I made an impression kind of early on, and that's how I got my start kind of selling paintings. Again, not exactly replicable unless you're in that situation, but what I would tell painters nowadays is that before you start thinking about selling, right, think about developing a community, because in a lot of ways your collectors, people that want to buy your work, they are a community of people, and you can be accessible to them long before they become people that buy your paintings. I do studio sales, and I'll be doing one I think in August. I think my plan is to do it in August on Patreon. It might get pushed to September, but anyway, the point is there's people that are a part of my community on Patreon that I work with, and they're checking my lessons and getting group feedback and whatever. But those people eventually they become people that collect my work too. So I guess I would say develop your sense of community, get to know people, but that means also you need to like put yourself out there. All right, like everybody thinks, oh, I got to develop a community. What do I do? Well, you just put yourself out there. Like you just go like, well, this is what I do. This is what I like. And, and usually when you do that on the internet, like-minded people can find you. So that's what you're shooting for, is just finding like-minded people who share your sense of taste. And a lot of times those will be the same people that want to collect your work. So it's not rocket science, but you need to lay the groundwork for it. I'm a big fan of this, and you hear me say it like too much probably on live streams. But dig the well long before you're thirsty. Don't wait until you've rented your first studio space to then figure out how to sell your paintings. Start posting stuff on social media. Develop a posting schedule for yourself on social media long before you ever need to monetize that community. Alanon says, what did you just use to smooth the hatching? I don't know. It's probably my paper stump. Or this is just a bit of tissue paper. Marilix2 says, when I'm doing skull planes exercise, is it better to use a 3D model or find a 3D print and do it live? Both have their merit. One's more expensive and more space intensive, and the other is, the only drawback is that it's a bit flat. But you may not know, but but I spent tons of money and took tons of time to actually make an app called the Head Study app that's meant to facilitate people to make skull studies, planes of the head studies, and so on. Basically, just share my take on head studies and so on with the world in a way that's easy to kind of carry around with you. So there's no kind of barrier of entry. But it's called the Head Study app. If you want to go the 3D model route, that's where I would go. If you have space and listen, you're gonna have a good lighting situation. This is the big issue with making drawings in your studio is if you don't have a good lighting situation, I don't think it's enough. Like to make a good study, you need a good lighting situation. If you don't have that, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to make like a proficient study from what you're working with. Again, I don't care if you buy the Head Study app or not. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to make money from the Head Study app, believe me. But the point I want to make is part of the whole idea was to be able to kind of control the lighting. So there's two different light sources in the Head Study app, and you can kind of control the intensity, location, and color of both of them. And that was important because if you can't control that, I don't think you can really proficiently like say that you can make a study. This is the problem that people have with a lot of like life drawing courses, is that they go to their local wherever, whatever art studio has the Pasadena Art Center, and they go to like go to life drawing there, but the lighting situation is like a shambles. It's like they got one weird like halogen bulb like hanging up, 20 feet from the model. And then they got like all the windows are open for some reason. It's got like all this other light kind of pouring in from other directions. Navjot says, I love the Patreon free lessons you give. Have watched them all that you gave. Fantastic. Yeah, every now and again on IG, on Instagram, I'll announce like that I'll do like a little free offer for Patreon to like get one of my lessons for free for that week. So if you're interested in testing out the waters, I would say make sure you follow me on Instagram. That's usually where that comes up. I should probably put it on my YouTube posts as well. And I will put it on YouTube posts because I think YouTube's, like I said, it's just a much better community than Instagram. I think. I mean, no offense to Instagram, but like, let's be real. Nick B says, joined the stream late, but source looks a bit like an AI-generated face. I'm curious your thoughts on limitations of AI lacking a grounding in constructivist concepts. It lacks a 3D kernel and is just mapping tones to a matrix, much like photorealism. Yeah, I think that it's interesting, right? That like you can generate faces with AI, which in fact, surprise, it's actually what this is. And it's true that you do recognize in it some limitations to the way it designs form. However, I would say that lots of modes of observation lack a certain sense of definition. And I've had experiences drawing from life or commissions drawing from photographs that were far worse. So when I'm doing this, I combine this very much together with my notion of the construction of the head. So I would say that a verbatim copy of an AI image probably would be a little bit unsatisfying. But that being said, I've never been in the business of making AI, or rather making copies of source images. Tarek says, how are you managing your values at this point? Do you have a specific value scale you're aiming for in your head? This is another thing, right? You've seen a lot of these online courses, or any courses where they say like, all right, you need to simplify the figure into 3 values, and if you do that, everything will work out. And I'm here to tell you, it's not exactly, it's not such a fine line in between that. Like, I would say that in this I have 3 values, but it looks like a lot more. But in my mind, I have like 1 value. I have a second like halftone value, and I have like the highlight value. Whether that reads as such, maybe it's a bit of a different story. But in my head, that's what's going on. Nabjot S says, I was wondering about how do you really draw from life? Going to make a shadow box. I'd love to train in an atelier way in India, but the only atelier here is Samsara Academy of Arts that is too far away. Yeah, no, it's true. But yeah, no, I mean, the drawing from life thing, I mean, I'm not gonna be able to answer in a live stream everything that you need to know to properly draw from life. But yeah, setting up the conditions to draw from life is quite important. Like you can't just show up and do it. You need like the proper studio situation to make it happen. Maria says, what is the purpose of art for you? Beyond the expression of something personal, what do you think its purpose is on a social level? I think that a lot of questions and a lot of thinking have ground to a halt when you try to make art utilitarian, to say that it does something for society. I think if anything, maybe what art does for society is it makes more thoughtful people. I know that I reflect more about the meaning and purpose of my life and my existence as an art maker than I ever did as a waiter of tables or as a bartender or whatever. And before anybody says, I want to head you off at the past, I don't think AI diminishes that. I think AI is just another question. You know what I mean? Like, probably nobody's as interested in this as me, but the idea of like robotic ethics, right? Like as robots become more and more, human seeming, we need to think about like, and intelligences in robots and artificial means become more similar, have greater capacity compared to us. We need to think about what are the ethical implications of our interaction with them, Not just, we're so concerned to protect ourselves from robots. But the idea that abusing or being abusive to a robot, it also what's the word? It erodes your own humanity, right? I don't think you practice abuse or anything without yourself being affected. So I would say I'm interested in all of the implications of the use of AI and robotics in terms of like how humans interact with it. But I have way more of like a door open policy. I'm just a curious person. Like I just want to know what happens. I want to investigate it. I want to see where it goes. I want to be a part of that movement. I've never been somebody who's like digging my heels in the sand and just going like, no robotics, no AI, no that. Like, I want to know. Come on, like bring it on is what I say. Which maybe I'm like the guy that's like, bring it on, and then like I'm the first one that gets like sort of killed by robots or whatever. But still, that curiosity still is very, very vibrant in me. Susie Schumacher says, love your podcast. Can you please interview Cornelia and George Anthony Morton sometime? This is a good chance. The podcast is on hiatus right now because, frankly, it's really time consuming to make. And it's more, the time consuming part is actually arranging time with other people. Like that's the difficult thing. So I think I need somebody, hey, if anybody out there, all right, let's see if we can crowdsource this, right? If you are alive and on the internet and you want to facilitate the recording of podcasts, get in touch via email. I need somebody to book guests. I need somebody to take my schedule and a guest schedule and figure out what time corresponds, because that is where, I'm going to be honest with you, where probably 80% of the episodes fail is just in logistics and booking. And I can't, like, I unfortunately don't have the excess mental bandwidth to do that. I wish I did. Because it's fun to make. Like, it's genuinely like fun to talk with other artists and stuff. But booking is such a pain. Oh my goodness. Amireza Banay says, as a beginner, what's the best way to study anatomy? I think it's really simple. Just study it through drawing. Just make anatomical studies and label them, which for those of you following the Anatomy for Portrait Artists course on my Patreon, you will know that that is at the core of it. Draw and label. This is how you learn anatomy. Or this is how you learn anatomy in a way that gets it into your work. I mean, I know people, I've come across students, they can recite all the veins of the head to you, but you look at their drawing and there's no anatomy in it. And so I think I just, when I was developing my courses, I had to ask myself, like, do I just want to like say all the names of stuff, or do I want to see results? Do I want to see the thing arrive in someone's work? For me, the answer was very obvious. I want it in the drawing. I want it in the painting. I don't want it to be like a latent knowledge that just sits around more or less kind of unused. So that's my hot take there. Mohammed Rizaldi says, thanks for streaming. My question is how to not be afraid to draw and how to motivate yourself to keep pushing. I mean, motivation is, I would say, is an ongoing battle. I think much like creativity, it's not possible to like systematize your motivation, to find one motivation and then it will like work for you forever. I think you need to have probably a variety of sources of motivation. Some days it's important to me that I'm competitive and that I see a great drawing out there on social media. I'm like, I want to make a better one. And some days it's important that I'm running a race just against myself, and I'm like, what needs to take place in my work? Where's my weak point, or what am I really excited about right now? But I find it's always like a variety, and so I don't just go to one place for it. I find it a lot of different places. Yes, Navjot S says, be right back, calling Nathan Fox. I think Nathan Fox is one of the guys who was painting digitally, but it's not him actually. He's not the one that studied Sargent. It's another guy. Hassan Ali Habib says, do we have to draw geometric shapes as a start point? It can be useful. I mean, have to is always a strong thing to say, but yeah. Let's see. Sorry, there's a lot of like comments coming in, so I'm like having to scroll to catch them. Let's see. Kent Clark says, how do you progress with your value scale or value composition? How do you progress with it? I'm not sure exactly the meaning of the question. I know I'm not saying it's not a good question. I'm just saying I'm not sure if I totally grasp what we're talking about here. But in general, I like a slow build up of values. I try not to get in a mentality where I'm trying to nail it in one go. Unless I'm sketching, and then at some points I'll just jam in the darkest dark that I can and just kind of go on from there quickly. Here, all I'll probably have time to do is just, surround this portrait with enough value that it kind of works a little bit. I mean, live streams, it's a blessing and a curse. I love to come in and work with everybody and chat, but the drawings that come out of it are so rough. For real. But you just embrace it and kind of roll with it, and whatever happens, happens. Just a live stream, Let's see. Yujit Jathava says, I like a drawing too much, but I feel bored when I'm drawing. Please give me a special video on it. I'll work on that, maybe. Connor Brown says, thanks for everything you do. Can you talk about your setup? Do you look at your reference image from a laptop? Yeah, my setup is just on an iPad next to my paper here. So I just kind of look back and forth and try to remember what I'm seeing. And Just in general, try to replicate the structure that I know is there. It's not very complicated. It's not very sophisticated or complicated. Really, the sophisticated, complicated thing is my filming setup. Which, all right, FYI, I am going to make a studio tour. That is going to happen. I'm committing to it here. You can keep the receipts. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen probably not in the early summer, but like in the autumn. It'll come out. Depending upon how extensive it is, I might make like a YouTube version and a Patreon version, because there's a lot of like really specific stuff I want to say. Because I think many of my students, you know, like they want to film their work too. And anyway, it's going to be a lot of work to make a video that tells everybody everything that they want to know. But I want to make a studio tour just to show like how my setup is and how everything that I do works, because I think it is really practical to know like how do you set up a space if you have one. You know, I think a lot of people are out there kind of working and not quite knowing some of the hacks that they can use to make their lives a lot easier. Misty Step says, do you have advice for finding a direction with your art? Drill deep on something, you know, spend time with something. I think that you know, portraiture for me is kind of a no-brainer. Like I was always interested in it. And this is an interesting thing, and then it was like the notion around the academy, and I think in general, like you get this a lot. Like I've like heard this from people who like say this to me. Like, oh, do you ever have any plans to do something except for just portraits? Like just portraits. Like it's like, oh, anybody can do just a portrait. And I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure that just making a portrait is particularly easy or like a foregone conclusion. I mean, you can draw a head, but there's always levels, you know, to things. So I guess what I'm saying is spend some time with something and lean into your excitement, you know. But there's no way to really tell without experience. You have to do it to kind of find out. And I mean, in some ways, that'll also tell you something, right? Like if you're excited enough to do something a dozen times, then it's very possible that this is a niche that you could find your path in. But if you find that you are incapable of doing something a dozen times, probably you're not interested in it enough to make a niche or a career of it. Does that make sense? Let's see. Josh Pulver says, do you work larger or smaller depending on the grain of the paper? Sometimes I have to make portrait larger to show detail over the grain. I mostly work on I always work on very smooth paper, so it's not often a consideration I find myself wondering or trying to balance. So I guess the answer is just no. Like I just always use smooth paper, and I always use like smooth canvas as well. Like I just found that over the years, that is what works best for me in general. I gotta step back for a second here. Hang on. I think I have like a proportion problem through here. There's like too much distance. Like the nose is like overall too long. I think the eyes probably need to like come down a bit. If I'm honest. If I'm totally honest with myself, I feel like my proportions are a little bit wonky. Yeah, oof, yikes. Some really scary problems here. Oh yeah. Well, this will be fun and instructive for everybody. That eye is like 1000% in the wrong place. Like it needs to line up more or less with like the outside of the mouth. So the white of the eye needs to be like here. Things you discover when you're drawing. But let's say this: don't be intimidated by needing to change stuff. It's not a big deal. It's kind of like the thing that you get most used to studying academically is that you're probably going to get it wrong the first time. And this is, by the way, as a group, let's all dispel one like internet notion. The idea that you do a block in and it's perfect, and then you just color everything in, right? You just do a block in and then you just add all your values in. That's how block-ins work, right? It's never how block-ins work. A block-in, ideally, is something that facilitates the changes you're going to need to make, inevitably. By that I mean, like, your first guess is not going to be perfect. Even with a Loomis, I don't care if you're drawing with a Loomis. This is like the most like pinned up kind of method that you're going to find, like for blocking in a head that's supposed to just be perfect every time. Nobody blocks in a Loomis head perfect every day. It doesn't work like that. You need to change things. That's the whole nature of making a block in. So one of the things that I emphasize a lot is like being flexible. So like if you need to move the eye over like several millimeters, yeah, like so what? Do it. Do it yesterday. Make a drawing where it's easy for that to happen. That's what I would recommend. Paul Aguilar says, what is the painting you think about a lot? The one that's behind the face cam here, which I'm working on. Hopefully one day I'll share it. Bree Anthony says, Bree or Bry, I'm not sure which one. I know you're probably not a psychologist, so I won't make my question so deep. I already like the start of this question. But how do you get over the feeling of, wait a minute, the feeling of feeling like you're never going to succeed at drawing no matter how much you practice? My opinion is that is a one foot in front of the other question. I've had doubts always. I've been I was, let's just be totally upfront and honest. Like, I wasn't particularly encouraged as a kid in terms of my ability to draw or to do very much in general. And so I've always kind of had a problem with self-confidence, actually. And the only thing that I've ever found that is like a self-confidence hack is just experience. If you have evidence that you can do something or that you can make progress, I think then it's easier to not listen to the doubts that come up. So that's my self-confidence hack that I use. I just I look at the first drawing and then I look at the 10th drawing and I think, something has happened in between those. Progress has been made. So hopefully that is some assistance. Let's see. Stupid Canvas asks, hope you have settled down in the new studio. Do you feel unfulfilled on days that you don't do art? If it goes a few days that I'm having to do like taxes and stuff, then yeah, like it starts to set in and I start to get annoyed. Yeah. Hannes asks, hi Stephen, how much would one of your portraits sell for? Highly depends upon the portrait. I do sketches and I do giant paintings, so it really, really is a range. But I'll say sketches I feel like are quite affordable. Kathy Locurto says, if your goal is painting, how does this type of graphite drawing eventually translate into painting? Who could I use this type of drawing only as a preparatory sketch or as an underlayer? I suppose you could. I mean, drawing is a good preparation in general for big projects. So if you're intent upon doing a big painting of something, I'd strongly recommend you to do a drawing of it first, just so you know what it's made of, in general, it's easy to think that you have seen everything in a picture, whereas in fact, very often we kind of skip over things. We look with a shorthand kind of at the subject. So it's nice to be able to look very in depth and very intently. I don't care how long you spent with the model or how long you've looked at your source image, I promise you will not look as long as I have at this while making a drawing of it. So it's actually just a very focused, very prolonged way of observing your subject. Jasmine says, if I wanted to recreate the atelier education at home, in what order should they tackle the subjects? I'm going to join your Patreon soon, but I have no idea what my schedule should look like. So this is why I made the roadmap. There's a post on my Patreon page that is like a roadmap to the education, like basically like how I think you should be using the lessons that I make. Obviously, you're free to use them however you want, but I've made a roadmap specifically so that questions like this of like, where do I start with this? They can be really easily answered. So it's a free post as well. Like you can check it out without being subscribed. So if you're interested to subscribe, but you're not sure like how you're going to go about the work, you can always check that out. Nia Kowaleski says, what practice in your opinion an artist needs to learn how to paint illustrations when your references don't exist in front of you? Exactly. How are you going to paint it like James Gurney's works? Oof. Let me just say that I am not qualified to answer that. I think I'll say that I think it's a very specific curriculum, and I think that there are people that are very wise and have learned so much about how that works, and I would not presume to be one of them in this moment. I never really studied drawing from imagination. As I said earlier, you know, there's a certain amount of like drawing from memory that I think is applicable, but that's only the bare bones of what the education is most likely. Liz Gridley says, I have an Airedale Terrier named Dipper. Any tips on keeping dog hair out of your work? If you have a long-haired dog, I feel like that is your fate. Like I'm not sure that you can keep it out, even if you wanted to. We have our little Gorshund is very short-haired, so that's how I keep dog hairs out of paintings. Orpheus says, I need regular Iggy updates from now on. Totally respect that. Lucas Cruzat says, is it worth to get an art education somewhere that isn't your first choice? Can it harm your improvement? Man, the variation, the variance in between like experiences. I think even between ateliers, you can have ateliers that are more or less useful depending upon like what the curriculum is. Even down to like what instructors are there. Be like totally honest, you know. Not every teacher is like a great teacher. I mean, you can learn and grow and change, become a great teacher. But I think communication is a skill that is not a guarantee for everybody that's in the industry. So I guess the best thing you can do is be like informed and like test out as much as you can, you know, like don't just go with the first place that you come across. Although that being said, like that's what I did in Florence, but it was a different time then. It was a different time. It was 20 years ago when everybody was young, when I was young, and I could just like try out anything and just see what happened. Nowadays, I'd be much more cautious. Pedro Vicante said, I bought a big mirror and will paint a self-portrait a day for some days. Any advice on that or any complementary exercise to that? I also draw anatomy in the mornings every day. I know, it sounds like a good plan. I mean, you know, just I just think practice, consistency, and studies is probably the best thing for you, you know. As I said before, like kind of confidence, I feel like confidence comes from experience. And there's no better way to get that experience than by drawing, you know, just making sure that you're doing the studies that you need to do in preparation. Never try to do like a big, super finished work without having studied it beforehand, you know. I mean, it's complicated to make a composition. You can't just chuck it out there and like kind of see what happens and expect to have results, you know. So I think preparation's key. Let's see. Jason Jason Miller is bringing up a topic from Instagram that was lighting up my feed for a while. I don't know how it came up. I think somebody just randomly DM'd me and said, one time, I didn't ask for this DM. Like I didn't have like some trending topic about it at the time. But someone messaged me on Instagram and said, one time I threw away my kneaded eraser, because a perfectly good kneaded eraser, because during a model break, my friend was like playing with it. So it was like his friend had like picked up his kneaded eraser and like done this and then put it back down on his easel. And he saw this and was like, I guess was like disgusted by it. And so he threw it away. And then like, for some reason, he DM'd me about it. Anyway, so James Milner is saying that, wait, sorry, I lost it now. Oh, no, it's gone. Where's this comment? Anyway, it was just saying, it was referencing that like, that he asked if he could borrow my kneaded eraser. Yeah, Jason Milner, yeah. Pablo Pistola said, what kind of paper do you prefer, charcoal or graphite? Always graphite, almost always Stonehenge. Decrepitus said, I was just going to recommend that book too. Okay, all right, yeah. Eric Howard says, thank you for going live, miss watching your streams. Ryan asks, are there any rules or principles that you follow in designing abstract backgrounds for portrait drawing? Ideally, you want diagonals. Diagonals are dynamic. For whatever reason, throughout the history of humanity, we have this response that a diagonal is a dynamic, exciting thing, and that horizontals and verticals are like a calm thing. So in general, if you want to have a good mass appeal, go for those diagonals. They will almost always reward you with a more dynamic, exciting composition than something like a horizontal or diagonal. Generic advice, but it fits. Let's see. JD Anarchy says, when you use your stump, do you... wait, I just lost it. Hold on. When you use your stump, do you do straight strokes? Because I'm having troubles with build-up in the wrong spots. How do you address? Do you just erase it or do you stump it more? Yeah, it's tricky. You know, the stump, you're shooting a little bit with a shotgun, you know? Like you're not... you don't have as much control, for instance, as you have with a pencil. But in general, what I try to do is like kind of build up some graphite and then, you know, go heavy stumping if I want to, if I need to. So the stump isn't doing like all the work, like the pencil's doing some of the work. In general, I find that works. But you're going to have inconsistencies too. But you can just probably go deeper into them, go harder. Would be my recommendation. And sometimes, by the way, sometimes you'll mess up, you'll ruin a drawing. Like, get on to the next one. That's what I say. Phyllis Riley says, I've followed forever and worked hard and cannot achieve the atelier look in drawing. Your sketchbook series seems more attainable. This is looking beautiful. Thank you so much, Phyllis. Pigmented Life says, I prefer charcoal because it's more direct. I don't have to sit there layering and layering. Some artists might disagree with you. I think graphite can be quite direct, but that's another thing. Maybe it's easier to be direct with charcoal. Maybe that's true. Fesh Go Gululu says, do you have a favorite artist or artist right now? I don't think so. I mean, frankly, if I'm honest, like right now, I've really just been focusing all the time that I have just on my own work. I really haven't been thinking much about other artists. I've been, you know, so busy with like everything in the new house. Whenever I have time to think about art, I'm just on my own. I'm on my own thing right now. But certainly there's always inspirational artists that come and go. Somebody's asking really intensely, like where I'm from. I'm from the US, Miami originally. Let's see. Javier Fernandez says, do you think that drawing has more to do with concepts than technique? In general, yeah. I think you could generally say that that's true. Uh, I mean, I say that only in general because I want to give room to say like, well, there's also technique. But but yeah, like if you know the concepts of how to draw, eventually the technique can come. Like this is something everybody, all right, not everybody. A lot of people make this mistake. Let's talk about it. The mistake is thinking that you need to really work on technique. Technique is something that if you practice it long enough, it will come. And I say that as somebody who didn't know that when I started out, and I was like, wow, really need to practice my technique. I just needed to focus on the concepts, make enough drawings, and the technique comes. You just got to make sure that you're not settling for less and keep pushing yourself. But it's not like some technique is going to save you. There was this. I can say this on YouTube. I don't think there's any problem with saying this. There was this notion when I was at the academy, right, that there were other schools in which you could have a very good technique, but a very poor structure, a very, very inaccurate drawing, which is kind of the equivalent of polishing a turd. So that you had this poor structure, but your technique was so good you could just polish it to death. And that was identified as a bad thing, which, in general, I agree with. I believe more in structure and foundation than I do in technique. But that being said, you'd be a fool to think that the professional world of galleries and collectors and everybody else outside of artwork, they care a little bit about technique. If you have a really bad technique, I think you're unlikely to be a highly successful professional artist. So, sure, don't bet the farm on technique, but don't shortchange it either. Craig Mullins! Targ has given me the name. Craig Mullins is the digital artist who I know was influenced heavily by Sargent, and who makes great digital paintings. And I think those things are kind of tied together. I think that I see a lot of Sargent in his work, and it gives it a kind of breadth that I think is very healthy, a breadth and kind of naturalism that I think is really cool to see. Thank you so much. That was really, really bothering me. Let's see. Gerard Dunn says, in my opinion, academic art schools are not worth it, especially if you want to practice representational, realist, or figurative arts. I don't know what you mean by academic art schools. Maybe you're meaning like universities. In general, I have kind of a poor view of universities. I think that mostly kind of non-representational modernism kind of took over universities a lot of years ago and has never really relinquished that control. Nowadays, though, like there are teachers like, what's his name? Peter Van Dyke that teaches at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. Great painter, knows so much about painting, is really, really wise, really clever. And I would strongly recommend that. But for the longest time, I think it was harder to find any kind of proper education in drawing and painting outside of ateliers. Michael Bodar says, definitely, especially since most collegiate art programs don't teach formal skills. This is the fact. I took still life painting for 1 semester. Actually, no, I think it was even just a couple projects when I went to college. Not nearly enough time. Let's see. Honestly, all right, wait a minute. I need to find a good question here. Pablo Pistola says, what kind of directional lighting and angle of pose in the subjects do you often find yourself gravitating towards for portraits? You usually want, now this is interesting, because this is the reverse 3/4, meaning that like the 3/4 turn is away and the light is coming from a little bit behind the subject. Which is not the typical lighting situation. Like you usually want like 3/4 facing. Meaning that the light would be coming from this side, and the side of her face, which we're seeing less of, is the side that would be receiving less light as well. But there are good, interesting artistic reasons to choose something alternative. And that's what I've done here. Because I want to see that kind of shadow side of the face, which it gives it like a little bit of like a mysterious look to your subject, which is usually, I find, making a picture with a kind of enigmatic pose in the model is usually better than one where they are like just in your face, like easy to see. You know, I want a bit of mystery in my artwork, even if my proportions are freaking awful at the moment. But hey, you know what? It's a YouTube live stream. Hopefully you guys and girls have a little bit of sympathy for me trying to do this on camera. Or maybe, actually it's YouTube, so I know you're not. Cumulatively, I'll say this. YouTube is meaner than Instagram. YouTube commenters are a lot meaner than IG commenters in general. Eddie Sedgwick says, can you explain the purpose of gesture drawing? Yeah, gesture drawing, I've had this conversation. There's a student of mine in California who's he's always going to these, or was going to these open drawing sessions at a local art center, and they always want to do like gesture drawings and stuff. And it's like, I struggle to think of like that what I'm doing is of like any value. Like what, you know, I just like fumble around with the charcoal for, 60 seconds or a minute or two or something, and then like nothing really comes of it. And I have to say that I feel kind of the same. I feel kind of the same. I think that there's let's take, you know what? Let's take the positive version rather than talking about what doesn't work. Let's talk about what does work. I think if you're doing a gesture drawing of a figure, let's see. You can see over on this side. So if you want to do a gesture drawing of a figure and you start with like, say, a box for the rib cage, an egg for the rib cage and kind of a box for the pelvis, right? And you start to think about where the center line of that is and how that communicates the form of the rib cage up here, right? And what that means to the spine coming down. And then you can think about, you know, the standing leg, or the what is called the femur and the greater trochanter, and the resting leg, and how the tilt happens between the knees, and what happens to the tibia and fibula as you have the standing leg coming down to the center of gravity. And you want to say like, all right, well, if I construct a little bit of a head here, like I think that there are, I guess, gesture studies that you can make that are like relevant and interesting. But I don't think the usual, like, I make a big squiggly line, you know, and then that's my gesture drawing. I don't really see it, you know, I don't really see it. It just seems like maybe people are saying that, oh, well, you know, I'm just loosening up my hand, or like something like that. But I don't know, like, I don't know, is that a thing? Is that the thing that we need to do? I'm not sure. But you can study, like it took me maybe 10 seconds or whatever to make this. Like you can do studies in a short amount of time that study things like gesture, but I feel like you need to be also like looking at the anatomy of the subject, for instance, you know, if you want to truly make a study that means something, you know, in relationship to your subject. That's my take. I'm sticking with it. Let's see. Pigmented Life says, an art house invited me to do a workshop coming up on June 1st where I'll be doing portraits in charcoal, but I can't seem to sell any tickets to it. Would you give me some advice? I think this is one of those. I think this is one of those things where, for one, I'll revert to some previous advice that I gave. You got to dig the well long before you're thirsty. It's cool that you got an opportunity, and I think you should definitely take that opportunity when it comes. But here's my take on, and it's like, you know, it's kind of like a bad word, you know, people get nervous around it. Here's my take on selling stuff, right? I think that you will be most effective in your life if you're trying to sell something by communicating what it is that you're excited about that thing. So marketing, which is another like bad word for artists, we're not supposed to know anything about it. We're not supposed to be able to talk about it or think about it coherently. At least that's what all the Disney movies will tell us. You know, if you try to like be good at business, your art will fail or something. which I've not found to be true. I think art is funded by money, and throughout history, great art is made with great funding as well. But the thing that you want to do is just communicate to your community what you think is exciting. I think of this as kind of what I call like soft selling. Like if you ask me about my Patreon or you ask me about like my Rome workshop, I'm going to tell you, I think Rome is like an incredible city, and it's like next to Florence, one of the places steeped in Renaissance learning. It was one of the richest periods in the entirety of art history. Italians in general, because of the history in their nation, have like a totally different mentality and understanding of arts and art culture. So dipping your toe into that while going there and experiencing some intensified study on portraiture, it's a no-brainer. Like, of course, it's going to be a dense and rich learning experience in a place like Rome. Why wouldn't you show up? Now, at no point have I said like, hey, I need you to buy a ticket. I'm just telling you, I think it's awesome, and you should like totally think about doing it because I think it would be such a great benefit. It's the same thing with my Patreon. Like, I've always loved academic study. I mean, at times I remember teachers would make fun of me because I wasn't like artistic enough. That like I still wanted to do cast studies, and they were like, you're supposed to be doing still lives and getting into expressive. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just want to learn about structure and form. And so there were places in the world where I didn't benefit from it. That was a negative trait for me. But it turns out that like teaching online, it's an immense asset if you're really interested in boring academic stuff like I am. So Patreon is the way that I've found, it's the most efficient way that I've ever found to get in touch with students, and for a very, very, very reasonable price, be able to pass on the things that I've learned to them. Once again, I'm not telling anybody to subscribe to my Patreon, but I'm telling you why it's cool and why I think I'm well suited to be working on Patreon. So that means, all right, so advice to you, like how do you translate that into actionable advice for yourself? You need to find a place to build your community, right? Where do your people gather? Like, where are the people who you would like to sell tickets to? Do they follow you on social media? Do you have an email list? You need to find a way to like facilitate some traffic or attraction for the people who you'd like to study with you. So it's a slow burn, and there's a lot of different things that you have to learn along the way. But part of it is just learning to like put yourself out there. Nothing's gonna start until you just put yourself out there. Take your insecurities, put them in a box, put them away. You can pull them out later and feel really awkward if you want to, but just put them away and put yourself out there. TTOO says, have you tried the Lumograph Black series? If you have, what do you think of it? I have tried it, not a fan. I really didn't like it. I found that the texture was really distracting in terms of how it relates to graphite. What Lumograph Black is like basically they're saying that we've created a way for graphite to go darker. What in reality, what I think they've done is they've changed their formula for the graphite and the pencils so much that I don't think it really resembles graphite very much anymore. If you work at Lumograph and you have some in on the process, let me know, because I was super unconvinced by it. Very unconvinced, I have to say. Yeah, no, I didn't like it. I bought a bunch of them because I thought, hey, this will be great. And then I used them and I was like, wow, this is not at all great. But much like this drawing, it is not at all great. No, I don't know. I'll fix it at some point, but at the moment we're in a rough stage. And in fact, we've actually passed the 2-hour mark, and oh my God, there's so many questions. I really appreciate all the questions. Usually I can't do much more than 2 hours on a stream because I get completely wiped out. But people, we're back. Please remember to like the video. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. We're on the march to 100K, and eventually I'm going to get there. I'm going to be really excited to do that. You can find the source image if you want to draw along with this. Just go to my Patreon page. There's a link in the description of the video that will take you there, and you can download this image and draw along with this live stream if you'd like to. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions and everything. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope that I will be seeing a lot more of you relatively soon. But that's it for now. Cheers.